The roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the dimly lit parking lot. A group of leather-clad bikers sneered, their eyes locked on a man who seemed out of place. Sylvester Stallone, Hollywood action legend, standing alone, his signature calm masking a history of discipline and skill. One biker stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Hey, tough guy, think you're some kind of movie hero in real life?" The others laughed, circling closer. What they didn't know, Stallone wasn't just an on-screen fighter. He had trained for years, mastering real combat skills, including a black belt in karate. Tension thickened in the air. Would Stallone back down, or would reality prove he was every bit the warrior his films portrayed? What happened next left the entire crowd speechless, an unforgettable moment that would be talked about for years. Stay tuned, because this is one showdown you don't want to miss. Before we get into today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's get started. The neon glow of a flickering streetlight reflected off the rain-slick pavement. The air smelled of gasoline and damp asphalt, a lingering mist curling around parked motorcycles like ghostly fingers. Somewhere in the distance, the hum of a passing car was swallowed by the deep rumble of idling engines. Sylvester Stallone stood near his car, adjusting the sleeve of his leather jacket. He had just wrapped up a quiet dinner at a roadside diner, a rare moment of solitude away from the chaos of Hollywood. But peace was fleeting. He could feel the weight of their stares before he even turned around. A group of bikers lounged near their choppers, cigarettes glowing like fireflies in the dark. Their laughter was low and edged with something unspoken. Stallone's instincts, sharpened by years of training and experience, sent a warning through his gut. He wasn't just being watched, he was being sized up. Here we go again. His mind flickered back to his early days, before the fame, before the millions, when survival meant more than just a well-rehearsed fight scene. He remembered the tough neighborhoods, the cold sting of a fist connecting with his ribs, the endless hours spent refining his footwork, learning how to read an opponent's intentions before they even moved. Now, as he stood alone in the dimly lit parking lot, he knew that knowledge hadn't faded. His fingers flexed slightly, instinct taking over. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had found him. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, smirked as he flicked his cigarette to the ground. "Hey, Hollywood," he called out, voice thick with amusement. "You lost, or you just like playing tough guy?" Stallone exhaled slowly, feeling the tension coil in his muscles. He wasn't nervous, just calculating. Every fight had an opening move. Every opponent had a weakness. And these guys? They had no idea what they were walking into. The tension in the air thickened as the group of bikers shifted, their smirks widening. Stallone could see it in their body language, the slight forward lean, the way their hands curled near their belts. They weren't just playing around. The leader, the one with the scar, took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You know, Hollywood types don't usually wander into places like this alone," he said, his voice laced with amusement. But there was something else beneath it. A challenge, a provocation. Stallone tilted his head slightly, studying the man's stance. His center of gravity was too high. Overconfident, that meant he wasn't a real fighter, just someone who relied on size and intimidation. "Didn't realize I needed an invite," Stallone said, his voice calm but firm. The group chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. One of the younger bikers, lean and wiry, took a drag from his cigarette and exhaled slowly. "You think you're tough, don't you?" he sneered. "All that movie training. Bet it don't mean squat in a real fight." Stallone remained still. He had been here before, not in this exact parking lot, but in moments just like this. Moments where men mistook him for a soft Hollywood star, forgetting that before the fame, before the cameras, he had fought for everything he had. The leader stepped even closer, now just a few feet away. The scent of tobacco and whiskey clung to his breath. "Tell you what, Rocky," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Why don't you give us a little show? Maybe we let you walk out of here in one piece." Stallone exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. He had a choice. He could walk away, hope they didn't follow. But he knew their type. They wanted to corner him, humiliate him, maybe worse. Then, just as he was weighing his options, one of the bikers reached out, shoving his shoulder hard enough to make him take a step back. And just like that, something inside him shifted. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, sharper. His mind flashed back to his early training, his sensei's voice echoing in his memory. A fight isn't about strength. It's about control. The leader laughed. "What's the matter? Afraid to break a nail?" Stallone smiled, just barely. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "You don't know what you just started." A slow breath. Controlled, calculated. Stallone felt the tension in his muscles, his instincts sharpening. The scarred leader and his gang were still smirking, waiting for him to flinch, to show weakness. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. "I asked you a question, movie star," the leader sneered. "You afraid to fight?" Stallone tilted his head slightly, his mind already running through possible scenarios. There were 5 of them, too many to take on all at once without strategy. He knew these types. Bullies who thought strength was loud, who assumed fear was the same as hesitation. But he also knew something they didn't. True strength was silent. His body wanted to fight. His blood was pumping, adrenaline itching, to be unleashed. But another part of him, the part that had worked hard to escape this kind of life, hesitated. He wasn't that kid from the rough streets anymore. He was an actor now, a public figure. If this got out, it wouldn't just be a brawl, it'd be a headline. Sylvester Stallone assaults local bikers in parking lot. The leader took another step forward, sizing him up. "What's the matter? Not so tough without a script?" The others laughed, their voices blending with the distant rumble of passing motorcycles. Then one of them, a younger, lankier guy with a chain hanging from his belt, muttered, "Maybe we ought to teach him a lesson." A flicker of movement. The young biker lunged forward, a hand grabbing at Stallone's jacket. Instinct took over. With fluid precision, Stallone sidestepped, his left hand gripping the attacker's wrist, twisting it sharply. The biker yelped, his body spinning as Stallone used his momentum against him, sending him crashing onto the pavement. Silence. The rest of the gang stiffened. The leader's smirk disappeared. The fallen biker groaned, clutching his arm as he scrambled to his feet, fury in his eyes. "You son of a—" The leader raised a hand, cutting him off. His gaze locked onto Stallone's, assessing him in a way he hadn't before. "So you do know how to fight?" Stallone exhaled. His muscles coiled, ready. "I know how to defend myself." The leader cracked his knuckles. "Good. Let's see how good you really are." The remaining bikers fanned out, circling him. No more words. No more mocking. The fight had officially begun. The first strike came from his right, a heavy punch aimed at his ribs. Stallone twisted, blocking with his forearm, then countered with a sharp elbow to the attacker's jaw. A grunt, a stumble, but the guy didn't go down. Then another moved in, swinging a chain. Stallone ducked just in time, the metal whipping past his ear. Before the attacker could recover, Stallone lunged forward, slamming his palm into the biker's chest, sending him staggering back. He barely had time to register the leader's movement. Fast, aggressive. A fist came straight for his face. Stallone swayed to the side, the punch grazing his cheek. He countered with a sharp kick to the man's knee, forcing him to buckle. The fight was controlled chaos. A storm of movement, impact, breath. But as much as Stallone was handling himself, he wasn't invincible. A sudden blow to his back made him grunt, his body lurching forward. Another attacker grabbed him from behind, locking his arms. His heart pounded. He had to stay calm. Think. With a swift motion, he stomped hard on the attacker's foot, forcing a loosened grip. In that split second, Stallone shifted his weight, using leverage to throw the man over his shoulder. Another hit landed, this time to his ribs. A sharp pain, but not enough to stop him. The leader was back on his feet now, eyes burning with something between rage and newfound respect. "You're full of surprises, Hollywood," he muttered, wiping blood from his lip. Stallone rolled his shoulders, his stance unwavering. "You picked the wrong guy." The leader lunged again, and Stallone prepared himself for the next round. The fight wasn't over yet. The leader charged, fists clenched, his boots pounding against the pavement. For a split second, Stallone could see the rage in his eyes, the frustration of a man who had never been challenged like this before. But Stallone wasn't thinking about the fight anymore. As he dodged another wild swing, a thought cut through the adrenaline. Why am I still fighting like I have something to prove? He had spent years escaping this kind of life, training his mind as much as his body, becoming more than just the tough kid from Hell's Kitchen. Yet here he was, fists raised, locked in the same cycle he thought he had left behind. Another punch came, aimed at his ribs. He deflected it, but instead of countering, he stepped back. The leader hesitated, thrown off by Stallone's change in stance. "What's the matter? Had enough?" Stallone exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "I don't need to keep proving I'm tough." His voice was steady, controlled. "You want to hit me? Fine, but it won't change a damn thing." The words landed harder than any punch. The bikers, still catching their breath, exchanged uneasy glances. Even the leader faltered, his fists tightening, then loosening as if he were grappling with something deep inside. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The sounds of the city, distant engines, faint voices, the hum of streetlights settled around them. Then unexpectedly, the leader let out a short, bitter laugh. He wiped a trickle of blood from his lip and shook his head. "You're not what I expected, Stallone." Stallone met his gaze. "Neither are you." The leader's expression flickered, something deeper than just anger, maybe recognition, maybe regret. But whatever it was enough. He turned to his men. "Let's go." One of them hesitated. "Boss, we can't just—" "Now." His tone left no room for argument. One by one, they backed off, their aggression fading. As the leader stepped away, he glanced back at Stallone. "You ever need backup? Maybe you've got more friends than you think." And just like that, they were gone. Stallone stood there, his heartbeat slowing, his breath evening out. This fight had never been about winning. It had been about knowing when to stop. Stallone stood motionless as the sound of the motorcycles faded into the night, leaving behind an eerie silence. His muscles were still tense, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. But the fight was over. And not just this one. Something deeper, something he hadn't realized he was fighting against all these years. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. He had always been known for his toughness, for his resilience. People expected him to be the fighter, the warrior, the unshakable force. But tonight had been different. Tonight, he had chosen not to fight. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of something greater. A voice broke through his thoughts. That was unexpected. Stallone turned to see a man standing a few feet away. The diner owner, an older gentleman with weary eyes, had been watching from the doorway. His arms were crossed, but his expression wasn't judgmental. It was thoughtful. Stallone shrugged. Yeah, well, I guess I'm full of surprises. The owner nodded, stepping closer. I've seen plenty of fights outside this place, but I ain't never seen someone walk away when they had the upper hand, especially someone like you. Stallone smirked. Someone like me? The old man chuckled. A fighter. A man with something to prove. He paused, then added, or maybe a man who doesn't have to prove anything anymore. Stallone didn't answer right away. The words sat heavy in his chest, pressing against something he hadn't fully acknowledged before. For years, he had built his career, his identity, around being the underdog, the guy who had to fight for every scrap of respect. It had driven him, shaped him. But had he been holding on to that fight longer than he needed to? He thought back to the moment when he had stepped back instead of striking, when he had chosen words over fists. It wasn't weakness, it was control. It was a decision. Maybe that was what true strength looked like. The owner clapped him on the shoulder, snapping him out of his thoughts. Come on inside, kid. You look like you could use a drink. Stallone chuckled, shaking his head. Kid? I haven't been called that in a long time. The old man smirked. Well, you just reminded me of one. As they stepped into the diner, Stallone felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just relief. It wasn't just pride. It was freedom. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had finally won. Not against someone else, but against the part of himself that still thought he had something to prove. As Stallone sat in the quiet diner, a warm cup of coffee in his hands, he gazed out the window at the empty parking lot. The roar of the bikers' engines was long gone, but their presence had left an imprint, not on his body, but on his mind. For years he had been defined by his strength, his ability to fight back against any challenge. But tonight he had learned that true power wasn't just in the fists, it was in knowing when to use them and when to walk away. Across the counter, the old diner owner watched him with a knowing expression. You know, kid, most people think strength is about proving you can take on the world, but sometimes real strength is knowing when you don't have to. Stallone smiled faintly. Yeah, I think I finally get that. The realization settled deep within him. He had spent his life fighting battles. On the screen, in the ring, and in his own mind. Always proving, always pushing. But maybe he had already won the most important fight of all. The fight to know himself. He finished his coffee and stood up, stretching his arms as if shedding an old weight. He nodded at the owner. Thanks for the drink and the wisdom. The old man chuckled. Wisdom's free, but next time, the coffee's on you. Stallone laughed, tossing a bill on the counter before heading for the door. As he stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, clearer. He took a deep breath, letting it fill his lungs, then exhaled with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Tonight he had faced a challenge, but he had also faced himself. And for the first time in a long time, he walked away not because he had to, but because he chose to. And that choice made all the difference. Strength isn't just about how hard you can hit. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Sylvester Stallone could have proven his skills with a single strike, but his real power came from restraint, wisdom, and self-control. This story isn't just about a celebrity moment. It's a lesson in discipline, respect, and understanding true strength. How often do we find ourselves in situations where we feel the need to prove something? Is real power in the fight or in the ability to rise above it? What would you have done in Stallone's shoes? Have you ever faced a moment where walking away was the stronger choice? Share your thoughts below.